You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Mr. Andy. Andy is coming, they say, but Andy's finally here.
Yeah. So the tube is awful. The underground. I wasn't driving today. I was on the tube, and I've had a terrible day with them. It's people have come back from the holidays, and now the trains are awful in London.
Wait, so you're taking trains?
Yeah. So London, nobody drives. Nobody drives. Only weird people drive in London.
Yeah, because they drive on the wrong side of the road. I know.
Honestly, I only crossed like 2 lanes of traffic to get to the station, and you thought I was crossing 4 lanes of traffic. It was absolutely mad. Taxis everywhere, and just getting honked, asking if I want to buy some weed. I was like, I just want to get home and talk to Robbie.
You're giving me so much information. I have so many questions. One, the train is still in service. I did not even realize that.
Yeah.
2, people are honking at you in the UK selling weed.
Yeah. I mean, I was walking through. Well, first of all, let's talk about the trains. I'm on the tube, London Underground.
People say the tube in America. That means YouTube.
Okay, no, the tube is what we call our metro system in London.
Ah.
I mean, that's if you get me nerding out later on, I'll tell you all about what that did in like World War II and everything. But it's just a metro system, and it runs all night on the weekends. So it runs 24 hours on the weekends.
Now, what about the weed?
The weed. Yeah, so I was at dinner with a very good friend of mine. She lives in quite a nice part of London, but between the nice part of London where she lives and the quite nice part of London where I live, it's a bit of a shit part of London. And there's went past a few just a normal part of London. There's people hanging out on the streets, and it's a Friday night. People are chilling out, relaxing, and wanting to see if I'm selling or buying weed, which I was not doing either. So yeah, just
wait. If he's saying, "Hey, are you looking to buy some weed?" and then you're like, yeah. What happens if he was actually trying to buy some for himself?
I had one guy being like, "You looking to buy weed?" And I was like, "No, mate." And then another guy, a Polish dude, just stopped me. He was like, and I had my headphones on. I was jamming away, just trying to walk as quickly as I could to get back in time. And he was just like, "Hey, mate, do you like weed?" I was like, "No, man." He's like, "You don't have anything to sell?" I was like, "Sorry, mate, no." I was like, "All right, dude, see you later."
You should have connected those guys.
Yeah.
You should have linked them in together like LinkedIn or something. You should connect them. Like we're drugdealersmeet.com.
Yeah, maybe there is. I don't know what it'd be called. I don't know if you call the LinkedIn for drug dealers.
So, Andy, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone out here and tell me a little bit about what you do professionally?
Oh my God, that's a bit of a question. Yeah. So, first of all, yeah, obviously as we discussed, I'm from the UK. I live in London, but originally I'm from up north, so up in Yorkshire. Slightly different part of the UK to what you see on the TV and see in the films. It's a bit more like I say, describe it to my American friends. It's a bit more like the Rust Belt that you guys have in the USA. It's all mining towns, all old coal villages, and that sort of stuff. Got a degree in archaeology from a university called Durham, which is quite nice. It's where parts of the Harry Potter film were filmed. The Harry Potters were filmed, so quite pleasant. And then after that, moved down for a few years to do a bit of sales and marketing, just in the world of tech. But got bored with that. I'm getting bored with that, I guess, a little bit. Not so much the day-to-day job, but just doing stuff outside of it. So a month or 2 back, I started a new podcast all about archaeology. So trying to sort of start to get back into that world.
Where'd you get this fascination for archaeology? Because not a lot of people chase after something like that, surprisingly, even though there's so many fascinating things about it.
Oh man, I was the luckiest guy. So I've always loved history. When I was a little kid, my parents took me to this museum, and they were doing this recreation of a famous battle in Africa between the British and the Zulus. Apparently, I was like 3 years old. Everybody else was getting a little bit bored with it. I just sat there at the front, just completely wrapped and loving it, enjoying it. And And then I remember that there was a film about it, and they recorded it for me, a film called Zulu. And I just watched that. And ever since then, ever since 3 years old, had an absolute fascination for history. And so when I was, so in Britain, just to explain the school system, we have primary school, which is like for up to year 11. Then you from between 11 and 16, you do your GCSEs. And then we have like a bit of what we call college, which you guys might call like junior and senior year of high school. And you get to choose what you're going to study. And I was really lucky that rather than just being forced to do anything, I had the opportunity not just to study history, but this school that I was at, they just happened to be offering archaeology. And archaeology is quite popular in Britain. It's we had a TV show called Time Team, and that made archaeology quite popular. And yeah, I studied it at high school, and I was like, this is absolutely amazing. This is so much better. I much prefer it to history as much as I love history. So then I went and applied and got a degree in it.
So what do you find fascinating about it, though? Do you find that the like kind of the buried treasure aspect, or do you find more of like the predating of history?
Mate, great question. I'm going to bore you by giving you a very long answer.
I'm already look for archaeology. I do give it some shit when it comes to it's not very looked into and funded super heavily. It seems like if they're going to pull a budget out of anything, they're pulling it out of archaeology, mostly because you can spend years and not find a single thing. It's like the one dude that has a metal detector for 40 years and doesn't find shit, and then one kid just picks one up one day and finds like $1 million like in ancient gold treasure or something. It sucks because then like when they're telling you, hey, we're going to have to cancel your program and all this research you spent and money you spent in to do this expedition in the desert, it's basically gone. That 10-year effort is gone. And next thing you know, the next day they find something, whether it was just a ploy to keep the money keep being funded, I don't know. But it's honestly, it's a tasking skill. First of all, you're basically searching for something and you don't know if it's there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so for me, why do I love archaeology? I always feel I disappoint people because for me, it's not so much the buried treasure aspect. I'm even nerdier than that. Now, don't get me wrong. I've done a few digs in my time, done a few excavations. It's awesome, fun. It's great. What's brilliant about Britain and being a British doing archaeology in Britain is that we've got so much history, and we've got over 500,000 years of history. So you can sort of, and we're such a small place that you can put your trowel into any bit of land and you're going to find something. But for me, what I love about archaeology versus say history is that history is really cool because you get lots of different documents saying slightly different things, and you get to debate it, and you get to talk about, well, this guy, was left-handed and woke up on the left-hand side of his bed one morning, so he didn't feel like he was in a good mood, so wrote it one way. And then this guy really didn't like foreigners, so wrote in a different way. And this guy was Catholic, and this guy was Protestant. It's much more about history. Studying history academically is much more about literature and what people are saying, and I'm massively simplifying. Whereas archaeology, and this is what I love about it, is because of the nature of the evidence, we're not looking at books often. We're looking at what people left behind. We're looking at their trash. They're just looking at their crap. There's one of the most famous discoveries in Britain is called the Coppergate coprolite, and a coprolite is a fossilized poo. So a fossilized turd, and people got very excited about that because we got to find out about their diets. And when we just dig them up, we find out about how they lived and their day-to-day life and what actual normal people were like. History often talks about kings and rulers and economics. Archaeology talks about real people. And for me, that's the first big thing. The second big thing is that the questions that archaeology tries to answer are different to history. And I think archaeology, when people listen to the podcast, I try and always expand it out. And rather than just go, look at this really cool find, isn't this shiny and glinty and isn't it cool? You say, yeah, that is cool, but also look at what it can tell us, and you can expand it out, and you can almost make archaeology into philosophy and start asking questions about what it means to be human, and what's great about being a human, and where society comes from, and where religion comes from.
Where people come from, dude.
100%, yeah.
I mean, humans came from Africa is what everyone says, but nobody even understands that the earliest evidence of like human ancestors was like in the 1930s. There were like I guess they used tools to dig up the remains of like a 25 million year old, like I don't even know what type of primate it was called, and they found it was early hominid ancestor from 1.75 million years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like this is all giving us our information that everything comes from Africa. Then you don't even want to talk about my favorite subject, Greek mythology. I mean, that whole ancient Greek history. We're finding relics. We're finding vases. Not only everyone always considers archaeologists just going in Egypt because there's just so much out there that's been covered up, and that's all on the factors of the environment, man. You got in Egypt, there's sand, wind, just blowing everything over. They found what was it? One of my favorite movies was The Mummy. I know it's a little bit ridiculous, but was on the aspect of they were treasure hunters and they kept finding mysterious things deeper and deeper as they kept on digging. And that's stuff when it comes down to like the basics, like what's that one? Trying to think of the one Chinese army that the claymation. Yeah, the Terracotta Army. It was, I mean, that was in China in 1974 was when it was discovered. And it was supposed to be like some type of funerary art. And like, they're just a bunch of soldiers made out of clay just standing. And they looked, I mean, to the best aspects, they looked like the realest of humans. I mean, they looked exactly like if you covered a person in clay.
Well, okay, cool. Can I jump in and say two? I'm going to keep it to two facts. The Terracotta Army is amazing. So first of all, the idea of making people and then burying them with the king. Time and time again, even in the earliest burials, we have this thing of like a king or a queen being buried and then having servants and slaves being buried alive.
With them, yeah.
With them. And so the Terracotta Army is almost like, I don't have enough servants to be buried with as many people as I want to kill. So I'm going to make them and bury them with me, which is just crazy. And then there was a documentary in Britain on the TV a couple of years back about the Terracotta Army. And they're so lifelike and so realistic. And they are so different to anything in China at the time that they think it's evidence of Chinese artisans and Greek artisans coming together and working together, because the Terracotta Army, the way they're made and the way they're stylized is much closer to how the Greeks were making things at that time, to how the Chinese were making them. So they think actually the Greek people from like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 miles away, I don't know how far Greece is from China, but thousands of miles, that they were actually helping them and actually trading with them and explaining to them how they created art. And the Terracotta Army is a sign of those two things being brought together, which I think blows my mind, because that's 2,500 years ago. And there was international trade going on between the Greeks and the Chinese. And it's not just about goods. It's not just about gold and wealth. It's actually about ideas and what it means to be human and art. I think that's just blows my mind, man.
A weird thought just came into my head. You have to think about people, at least back in ancient history, way back in the day when we were first kind of starting out, getting a little bit of our ground to us. We learned off watching animals. We learned how to kill from watching animals around us. We learned from our environment. And what do animals do when they're trying to save something for later? They bury it.
Yeah.
So what did we try and do? We buried things. We kept stuff covered up. So it's weird to think that a lot of people are so not keen to archaeology, on the fact that archaeology's basis is discovering things that are basically buried, that either whether it was environmental issues or maybe human act. I mean, have you ever heard of the statue of Villanova, the Lady of Villanova?
Yeah, the Venus figurine.
Yeah, the one that everyone thought that was supposed to be a goddess, a statue for a goddess of fertility. So it was supposed to help you be more fertile if you carried this idol around with you. And then they later found out, like 200 years later, a scientist discovered it wasn't meant for that. It was actually supposed to be some type of doll for a little girl.
It's absolutely crazy. And what's really cool about those figurines, I think we talked about the same thing. I'm gonna check this. I'll probably be wrong. I think we talked about the same thing. Those Venus figurines from Europe, from the European stone. Yeah. We think those Venus figurines. Yeah, there's loads of debate about what they are, and they're really weird because a lot of them, like the women, are really, really big in the statues. Like don't want to say grotesquely big, but they're much, much bigger than what you'd expect to see in a group of people who spent their entire time walking, living on the edge of starvation, hunting large animals.
All for the fertility aspect.
Yeah, but we think it's the fertility aspect, but then they did some anthropology and actually compared and actually went and looked around to see if they could find any tribes, any hunter-gatherer tribes, where some of the women had a similar body shape. And they found in Africa that tribes that were particularly dependent on one food source, specifically like animal meat, some of the women developed a adaptation. They had a gene which meant that they carried a lot, like an extraordinary amount of fat on their hips and on and in their breasts to protect themselves against famine. And there's some scientists, and it's hard to prove any of this stuff, but there's some scientists that have suggested that not only are these maybe dolls, or maybe they're fertility symbols, or maybe they're just people just making them because they're bored, but that they can actually tell us that there's a chance that people 20,000 years ago had this adaptation, this gene to protect themselves against famine, which is really, really cool. A great combination there of archaeology and anthropology working together to propose a pretty neat solution to why we have these weird statues of these women that don't look like European women at any rate, and don't really look like many other women who live in the area now.
Have you ever kind of wondered, like, the weird concept where they would torture you by burying you up to your neck? This is a reason why that archaeologists actually find a lot of bones too, is because this is similar. This was very popular in Africa. They would bury you up to your head, basically, and then they would just let you basically starve to death in the heat, and your bones was already under the sand. So you basically got covered up anyway. But also, this is very, very common, not just with Africans, but the Aztecs. I mean, that was a form of punishment. That's where we find a lot of remains. I mean, dinosaurs, all these bones we find, like all these extinct birds and creatures. I mean, people think that you're just finding vases. I'm like, no, just like how you were saying before, that imagine being buried with all your servants. This was something the Egyptians did when they would used to mummify their pharaoh or king. They would lock the servants in the pyramid with them. They would just lock them in there, like, yep, sorry, you rolled the dice, and then shut the door. Then they would bury they would mummify their pets. Like cats were seen as the protector of your soul going on to, because they were known as the guardians of hell, or the gate beasts, like how we have hellhounds or something. That was the cats. They were, that's what kept the bad spirits away. And then they would put coins on top of your eyes to carry you across the river of Styx. Like that always boggled my mind, because when I find in folklore and with mythology, that whole concept was always what made it so kind of pertaining to me.
Yeah, I think, mate, it's the one thing that struck me as you were going through these things, like how brutal the Aztecs were, and then how some of the stuff. Sometimes what the Egyptians did was like beautiful and really tender, like when they mummify their pets, but then also really vicious, like when they bury their servants with them. It's, first of all, humans are complicated and do weird stuff all the time. I've just,
there are people that still believe in Santa Claus.
Hey man, like, we all need our myths to keep us going to sleep at night. Everybody has myths that they believe that aren't true, and people will do weird stuff in response to weird situations. But the one thing I did realize is that it seems to be that the more complicated a society gets, the more stratified and the richer it gets, the more cruel and unusual the things it does to its people are. So
we take it from the purest aspect. I mean, you see that nowadays with people taking religion. Now it's all about a donation. Now it's all about it's turned from this pure form in the beginning, and now it's got so many added details to it. This is why the Constitution isn't amended. This is why we can't just keep writing down a little under the line. Because if that happened, the Constitution would have, probably 80,000 pages stapled behind it. It's because we always think of something better. We always think that this is going to work, and then it ends up not working. So it's just good to have a good basis for guidelines.
The Constitution does have 80,000 pages, like glued behind it, and that's the law code. But yeah, no, mate, it's you're 100% right. You have to. It's, as a society gets richer and more complicated and more stratified, as some people start going up to the top and taking a greater share of the wealth, they don't. One thing archaeology shows is that people don't stop and go, all right, I've got enough wealth now. That's good enough for me.
People don't stop at that.
No, they never do. The more, and this is actually where archaeology, and we started off this conversation, you made a great point, which I didn't thank you enough for saying, which is that when funding gets tight, heritage and archaeology and culture, first thing to go. And
It's like band class in high school. It's
yeah, and that's wrong, because when people ask me like, why are we talking about archaeology? In Britain we've got Brexit going on. In America you got your own dumpster fire of things going on over there. Why would you want to talk about past and heritage and archaeology when there's such more important things to say? And what I always say is that when you study the past, when you study history, I don't believe that history repeats itself. I don't think that happens. But I do think humans have always been human, and that humans are going to make the same mistakes, and in similar situations, similar phenomena appear. Similar things happen when the situations are the same. And you look at archaeology, look at the past and go, oh yeah, every single time people start to get wealthy, what happens is they start to accumulate more wealth to themselves. They start to get richer and richer and richer at the expense of the common people, of the mass, of the 90%, whatever it is. And if you're telling me that that's not relevant to today and that isn't an insight to our society, and when people start saying, oh yeah, let's give the rich people more money because that'll make us richer, well then actually archaeology and history, anybody with an understanding of history will tell you that that's codswallop, because it's just not borne out in the record. And whatever your political opinion, history and archaeology can make us more empathetic and contextualize the current situation. So that's my little soapbox at the moment, that archaeology and the past can help us understand our world today in a real, genuine way.
It's 100% true, though, because you got to think we got to know where we came from. We also have to know the history and our culture as well. And we're not going to find that information out just by creating the next iPhone 20. That's not going to happen. You have to look back at, we can all learn from our past mistakes, but we never do. And not only our past mistakes, another country's past mistakes or another place's past mistakes, because they've probably already have done it and they've learned from it. I mean, exactly. China already has handled so many problems that we're dealing with now, and they're like, "Dude, we did that 10 years ago. Like, we already got way past that. You guys need to start looking at our history a little bit." We're like, "No, we're America. We're going to get it done when we get it done." And there's so many fascinating things. Like, one of the major ones I think of when they find of bodies that were buried and covered in ash and preserved with this ash, and it's Pompeii.
Yeah.
There was a statue I saw in a museum of a woman that was covering her baby, like if a volcano just erupted and the lava was rushing at you. She was covering her baby in her arms, basically, like trying to take the lava first. And she was just preserved like that in this black ash all over her and her baby. And it was perfectly outlined like a statue, like someone sat there and marbled or carved it out of stone, basically. And I was like, that's an impactful message. It shows so much about the people's nature back then, and not only just this tragic incident.
Honestly, there's a book you should read called Pompeii by Mary Beard. Great book. If you ever get the chance, I don't know, have you been to Europe before? Have you traveled around Europe at all?
No, have not left America.
Oh man, well look.
I know I'm missing out. I'm missing.
No. Like, traveling is a tough thing for, and it's when you've got a country as big as America, you've got why would you want to leave? You've got everything you could want in America. But if you get the chance to travel to Europe, go to Pompeii. I've been to it once, and go to Pompeii and then go to the Archaeological Museum in Naples, because it's moments like the one you just described over and over and over again. You see the houses where, two people, they call them the lovers, were cuddling each other in fear. You got the dogs, but then you've also got and you go, that's so tragic. And then you've got all the comic moments. Like there's a famous mosaic from Pompeii, which essentially it's a mosaic of a very angry looking dog. And in Latin around it, I can't speak Latin, but essentially it says in Latin, beware of the dog. Which is just like a real human moment where they've got this terrifying dog, and they're just saying, guys, we're going to spend a lot of money just making you aware that our dog is a bit mental, a bit crazy. And then there's also, more, I guess the word would be salubrious, some more naughty moments as well in Pompeii. We found the only purpose-built brothel in all of Roman archaeology in Pompeii as well. So it's just the most incredible sight, because you get touching, on one hand, you get touching moments of like the most personal, tragic moments in ever.
You just know there was one dude jacking off while that volcano was coming in. He's like, if this is how people are going to find me, this is what's going to happen.
But
You-
honestly, 100, I mean, this is why I love it. I mean, okay, back to it. It's just like, I know it's a stupid thing to talk about. You're 100% right. This is why I love archaeology, because it's not, if you just read the books and just read history, you see, and you just read the mythology, you just see these great heroes fighting against dragons and everything. What history shows us is the guy just in his own room, just be like, look, I'm going to die. This is happening.
Yeah, you want to die, at least be happier and pleasure while it's happening. Like, come on now.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, you don't get that with any other subject. You don't get that direct connection with individuals.
Humans.
Yeah, with humans. And it's if I can be a little bit poetic, there's this line in a play called The History Boys by Alan Bennett, British guy, and they're talking about the joy of writing. And I think it applies to archaeology, where this guy, basically his teacher, is saying, when you read something and you have a thought, or you read a thought which you thought only you had thought about, you read something that somebody else has written down, it's something that you thought was personal or just to you, and you read it, and for a moment there, that person who might have died 200 years ago is writing down exactly how you feel. It's like a hand reaching out to you from the past saying you're not alone. Well, that's beautiful and poetic, but archaeology sometimes shows us that in a much grittier way. Here's where people were eating dinner. Here's where people were going to the bathroom. Here's where people were having sex. And it's just like a hand saying from 10,000 years ago, saying, look, humans have always been the same. And we've always got ourselves out of bad situations. We've always found a way to find joy and humor and laughter. And we're always going to be the same. And I mean, this is me getting very philosophical about it on you, Robbie. But
I like it, dude. I mean, I'm learning. I mean, I still think about the one guy at Pompeii that freaking got killed by it was like a falling thing of marble. He actually didn't get killed by the volcano. He was running away, and just a giant thing of marble.
That's brilliant.
There's literally a picture, if you look it up, it's just this dude with his legs covered in ash pointing out of the ground, and there's just this giant marble block that fell on his head. I was like, yo, imagine you make it out of that giant Pompeii incident only to be killed by a flying thing of marble.
I mean, I know I shouldn't laugh, but it really that I just found there's some really darkly comic moments in amazing sites like that, where it's just like you could have been killed by this massive gas, or you could have been killed by the lava flow or the ash. No.
So close.
You just stood under a broken lintel, or you just went into this like pub at the end, and it was just a bit broken. And
you decided to take a breath after running all those miles, and the next thing you know, you get hit by a giant marble block. It happens. I get it.
There was a guy around Pompeii, and he was on the island of Capri, which was way out of the danger zone. He was a really rich guy. It's called Pliny. He was having a nice time, and he was super curious. I think it was him. It's either him or his son wrote the world's first encyclopedia, and I can't believe that I don't know which one it was who did this. And I'm going to probably get loads of angry emails from my classmates going, "You should know, it's Pliny this one, Pliny this one." But I think it was this guy who wrote the first encyclopedia. He'd never witnessed a volcanic eruption before, and they didn't think that Vesuvius was volcanic. And so when the volcanic eruption happened, he didn't so much run towards danger as he just ran towards curiosity. And he was so excited that something so unique was happening that he got in a boat and sailed over to Venice and over to Naples and over to Vesuvius, not to go and save anybody, just because he wanted to document it. And then he obviously got killed. And I think it's just, in that one archaeological site, you've got people who are too curious for their own good, people who are too daft for their own good, people who are just selfish, just having a good time on their own as things die, and then other people just, having last few moments with their special ones.
I could just imagine there being like a population sign outside of Pompeii, and the guy's just sitting on the water on his boat, and he's looking, and then he's like, well, there's 53,000 people in that town. So I'm going to say it's 53,000 people died. And he keeps writing, and then he looks up and sees like a family like, sir, help us, save us. And he's just like waiting for the lava to come and get him. He's like 50,003.
I honestly, the way the Romans thought about the way the rich Romans thought about some of the common citizenry, 100% could happen. 100% could have happened. We're just like,
Back
but
then, nobody really cared about anybody. I mean, there was definitely a lot more community mindset when it came to working together to get things across. But it seemed like if someone just died, they didn't have any emotional attachment to that person. They just kind of moved on, like it happens.
yeah, sometimes I think. Oh man, I could talk about the Romans all day because
Oh, dude, let's go. Let's go.
they're a whole bundle of contradictions. Because sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, you're dead," and that's fine. Other times, there's like for example, a guy called Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great. He was mocked. I mean, like insulted in the street because he actually liked his wife. It was considered the least Roman thing to actually like your wife.
Well, back then you had six packs, you had all this stuff that was supposed to be manly. The Romans are considered, like in my mind, they're more like alpha males, and then the Greeks were more of an intelligent design. They did a lot of their stuff basis on literature. It's why a lot of our stuff, when it comes to like theatrical incidences such as like comedy, tragedy, all those types of playwrights, a lot of our art comes from there. I think the Romans really only created the one thing I super enjoy, and that's just a good irrigation system, like for our bathrooms and stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they did create it, but we forgot about it and we reinvented it. Like, but the Romans, yeah, you're right. Like, the Romans were like brutally efficient, really effective. They really liked like creating good laws and creating really effective ways to kill people and really effective. They like to be effective and efficient.
They like to be forceful.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Rome, but they absolutely wanted to be cultured. But their height of their culture was the gladiatorial games. The height of their culture was like, I reckon we can flood that arena and drown people in it. Whereas the Greeks were like, well, what we could do is we could create some clouds on stage and actually have the gods coming through the clouds to end the play on this beautiful moment. And the Romans were like, nah, mate, let's get some people killed.
One of the most interesting philosophers I did a little bit more research into was Aristotle, man. I mean, that guy wrote and created so much. And then you want to talk about Plato. I mean, all these people were coming from Greece. They were more elegant. They had better, they wore robes. They wore the togas and all these types of things and had like leaves in their hair. And they were more spouting and paying attention to nature and the energy around them, when Romans were more about like, wearing heavy plated armor and, having swords at their hip constantly, always sparring and training at a very young age. It was a whole different, it seemed like a mindset of both of them.
But then you say that, and then you actually start to dig into it, and you realize that when we talk about the Greeks like that, we only mean the city-state of Athens. We mean a city-state, like when we talk about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Herodotus, the guy who founded the history. When we talk about the Parthenon and all that, that's just from maybe 150 years. One city-state, democracy and all that, one city-state, 150 years. And it ended in tragedy because the brutal Spartans, who were also Greek, were like, no, democracy is a bad idea. Poetry is a bad idea. Philosophy is a bad idea. We just believe that might equals right. And they came in and killed them all. And then you go, okay, cool. So yeah, Athenians good, Spartans bad. But then you realize that no, the Athenians were famous for multiple massacres, which meant that they lost the war against the Spartans. And also that Socrates spoke joyfully of how great it was to be in a fight. And it's the, what I think people forget is that every great civilization, every great empire has had at its core a ability to kill other people. And that's and you can focus on all the highfalutin stuff, all the great stuff. A lot of people in Britain try and do this, where they talk about the great achievements of the 19th century, the railways and everything, and they go, yeah, because we had the most effective navy, because we ruled the oceans. And when Americans talk, about how great your culture is, which it is, people don't want to talk about the fact that that's built on the fact that you guys are really, really good, better than anybody else at killing other people.
Oh, for sure.
And that's pretty much how an empire is formed, and a great civilization becomes great, is it gets much better at killing other people.
Well, the problem is this is a problem with humans. Everything's seen as a battle. Everything's got to have a win to it. Someone's got to lose.
Mhm.
And most of the most fascinating things I've ever found out in my entire life have been in other people's histories, Russia's history. But we only know our history because history is written by the winner. So whoever wins a war gets their history side told about them and glorified in the books while the other person gets shit on. And it's sad, but there's a lot of wonderful things. I think like when I look at Rome, I look more at the Renaissance period only because I have a fascination with Leonardo da Vinci.
You mentioned in your last episode with I thought it was really interesting what you said.
He's one of my all-time favorites only because it inspired me to, when I was a kid, I was playing a game called Assassin's Creed that bases around these.
Assassin's Creed 2?
Assassin's Creed 2, 1. I own them all, dude. I beat them all. Actually, my favorite ones.
Love them. My favorite games. They're awesome.
Favorite one's Odyssey, and I still play that even though I've beaten it multiple times. I love just running around and seeing all the Greek statues and stuff.
Awesome.
Greek mythology was something that was taught a little bit in my school, but much like something like archaeology or something, it's not looked at as thoroughly as it should be compared to all the other types of subjects you could be learning. They teach you like American history more than they teach you world history, which I think is stupid because honestly, we're only divided by lines in the sand, basically.
Because from my understanding, they only teach you American history. Like they only teach you in American schools like the last 500 years of American history. Do they teach you about like the Native American cultures? Do they teach you about the Mississippi culture? And
they teach you a little bit of that in world history, but even world history still gets kind of focused on this.
I love that they consider Native Americans world history.
So now, where this is something I really found fascination with, was I have an art history teacher. And he used it in a way I can understand. I was really into psychology. I actually went to school for psychology, and as I was kind of doing my own psychology classes, I had an art history class that I had to take as an elective. And he was using ways of me for interpreting art through psychoanalysis. So I actually wrote a paper on the psychoanalysis through a couple of paintings and trying to decipher what I could see from it. And he's like showing me old paintings of fruit and all these types of things like that was created around the Greek and like Roman era by famous painters, especially like Renaissance period. We're talking about Vincent van Gogh or like, older ones too. I can't think of the exact name. I want to say
you got Rembrandt and Van Dyck.
Yeah, Monet, isn't he around that time period?
Monet's 19th century. He's a impressionist.
I'm trying to think of the exact one because there was a person that they had. He had a paint or a bunch of paintings that were ripped up little squares, and you could combine them all together, and they made one giant.
Manet. He's a I can't remember the school. He's mid 20th century. Manet, the guy who did all these like great pictures, like women and everything with the large cuts of paper.
Well,
he's amazing.
He started me with that one, and he said, keep going deeper and deeper until you find something you're super interested in. Where I started looking, I ended up going so far as starting with the Greek statues and then ending up going into where Egypt was and looking at all the vases and all these things that they were basically painting onto their things that were telling a story. It wasn't just art. Like, I want it in white. I want it in cream. I want it in beige. It was like, no, I want people on it that are holding and praying to something or having this that made more culture to the, I guess, the items around them. And looking at it, just like using psychology, kind of interpreting like what that meant, I was able to kind of decipher like, was this vase depicting a story of a bunch of slaves, or were they bowing down to a god? Were they giving love to a god? I had no idea, and my mind just started to wander with it.
That psychoanalysis and trying to understand what an artifact or an object is telling us and what it means and what that tells us about the people who made it, but also it tells us about people. That's not art history. That's not history. That's archaeology. That's what archaeologists do. There's this thing called artifact biographies where we don't just look at what the object is, but look at how it was made, look at where it came from, and look at all the people who have try and imagine all the lives of all the people who have touched that object. And that creates a whole, and you can put a load of psychoanalysis into it. Psychology is a big up and coming area of archaeology research to analyze what the art and the objects they're creating can tell us.
So are you saying I'm not a psychologist at heart? I'm an archaeologist at heart.
The more you dig, That's my little pun for the day.
I think I just dug inside. I know I'd be the worst archaeologist ever.
Why would you be the worst archaeologist ever?
Because they just say, when's this dated? I'd be like, fucking look at it. And then be like, I don't know, like 17 something.
Man, honestly, I am terrible at dates. Awful. If I
I
want
don't even know what day it is today. Shit.
I honestly, whenever I was doing like the pottery courses or anything, I always had to have the big reference books open for me. I'm not the sort of guy, like, I've got archaeology friends who can pick up a piece of pottery and go, oh yeah, that's 3rd century Roman and the bowl looked like this. I'm like, how do you know? But what I'm good at, and this is why I love archaeology, is that you need different people with different skill sets to have a successful piece of research. It's innately collaborative as archaeology. So yeah, you need people. Also, I'm terrible at spotting things in the soil. I just don't have the attention to detail to slowly scrape away layers and layers of soil and go, oh cool, that's a coin. Oh cool, that's a piece of bone. My head's too high in the clouds. So you need people who are really good at that. You need people who can take a pot and say, this is what it looked like. And then you need people, this is where I start to consider my role in the world, who can take all that research, you can combine all that research and use that to tell a story and start to use that evidence, not just to say what was there, but why it was there and what it's telling us, and go deeper into it. And that means you need to understand philosophy, you need to understand psychology, you need to understand sociology, geography, and bring all these different things and be a bit more of a generalist and use that to create a theory or a philosophy around what the evidence is telling us. And if you do that and base a theory about humans or base a theory about society on material evidence, mate, you've been an archaeologist.
This is a lot what psychologists do. They actually take bits and pieces from each psychology theory and they use it to help diagnose a patient. Just like a archaeologist using different tools or something, he's got to take a piece from everything to kind of equip it into one to really know where something came from. And even then, the coolest thing about being an archaeologist is when you find something and you try and predate it the best you can, that you don't ever really get discredited for something, especially if it's just a little bit off, because you are making an estimate. It's very hard to predate something like this came out of the oven 10 minutes ago. Did it come out of the oven 10 minutes ago, or did it come out of the oven 10,000 years ago? I have no clue. See, that's the wonderful thing about it, is you can get so damn close, especially with something like without even, I mean, back in the day, they were shooting like, I don't know, 1600, 1500. Now they're finding out that there's water erosion on the Sphinx.
Yeah. It's
like,
amazing.
Showing that there's water where they never thought there was water. It's like, that changed the whole game.
So yeah, it's only because we've improved our photography that, so 20 years ago, if we were having this conversation in 1990, say, I would confidently tell you there is no Stone Age cave art in Britain.
That's a lie.
Yeah, but it was true it's true.
Yeah.
Now, only because people are like, well, what if I use, because we've got a better understanding of how light works and how, and some people have done some great work in caving and understand how caves look in structure anymore. We've gone, that rock looks weird. That carving shouldn't be like that, or that smudge shouldn't be there. And then taking a laser scan of that wall and then gone, oh my goodness me, somebody drew a mammoth on that 20,000 years ago. And it's the development, and this leads me on to something really cool about archaeology. And I think one of the things that I got sold university on in Britain was transferable skills. If you come and study this, even though it's got no relation to anything that you would do in the business world, you're going to learn transferable skills. You're going to learn creativity. You're going to learn empathy. The big thing archaeology teaches you is two things. One is, beyond the other things I just mentioned, is teamwork. Because as I said, just mentioned, no one person can be a end-to-end archaeologist. You need people who are the experts in the different areas to collaborate, and also be truly scientific. And I think what that means is look at what the evidence is telling you, and base your arguments on what you are seeing, not what you want to be seeing. But also, don't get upset with people if they disagree with you, and don't get upset with people, or don't get upset with yourself if you're proven to be wrong, because that's part of science. Disagreeing with each other, that's part of science, and being proven wrong is part of science, which is how I go to bed every night, because I get proven wrong all the time.
The weirdest thing about the cave paintings. Okay, now they found this cave. Or do you think when you look at them, we interpreted in the beginning that they were stories. There were people drawing scenes like a movie. Like kind of like showing like you have one dude with a stick, and then you have him killing an animal, like kind of a little bit farther into the cave, and then they figured out they decided, because back in the day, to do something like that, to paint in a dark cave, you had to have light. So they used to use candles off of animal fat. They used to burn that. And I think they discovered that how a candle, when it's lit, it flickers. Okay. It's constantly flickering. So they wondered why there was these drawings on the cave, if they were just art or were they depicting something that happened, their history maybe. Then they decided to light a candle in a cave, just like how they would, and place it at the same spot where they would have placed the candle when they were painting. And it made the images flicker back and forth like a movie, like a scene depicting a battle. And they did that. And I hear this and I'm like, holy, like we thought for so long they were just painting down their history. No, they were showing scenes. Now it's given a whole outlet for entertainment.
Mate, it's so I was super lucky. Again, come to Europe, travel. There's an amazing, that cave that you're talking about. It's a cave called Chauvet in France. I didn't realize this, but I went on holiday with my parents to France this year, and I was just looking at what was around, and I was like, oh my goodness me. Chauvet Cave is like an hour and 45-minute drive. That is 100% doable. So I dragged the entire family with me. And what's cool about Chauvet Cave is that they've completely sealed off the original cave. You can't get in because so many people were visiting that their breath was starting to damage the paintings. What they've done is they spent like 20. Go on.
I would say that's actually common in Hawaii. There's coral out there, and they have a fish reserve that live with the coral. People stand on it. All the tourists, they won't let anybody even get near it anymore.
Exactly, and it's sad, but I love that even in our enthusiasm, humans end up damaging stuff. We're so excited about it that we can't help but ruin it.
Got to touch it.
What the French did, and actually I think it was the EU as well that funded it hugely. They spent like 20 million euros, which is probably about $25-30 million. On building a replica cave, complete 100% replica of the cave, about 10 minutes drive away from the original cave, which you can go in now. And it's not as big as the actual cave. It's not laid out the same way, but the way they walk you through it is very similar to how the original tours were going through it. And they show you things, cute things, like the little baby bear prints where cave bears were living were staying in these caves. And we found the little baby paw prints when the babies were just playing on the walls. We found awesome things, like we found actual ash and charcoal from the torches and those candles that you were talking about. We've actually found places where, as they were walking through the cave, their torch or their candle brushed up against the wall and left an ash mark. And at the very end of the tour, and this is awesome, they actually take you to that place that you were talking about, that place where they've got, deer and lions like layered on top of each other in different positions and different movements. They turn off all the lights. It's completely black. It's a little bit cold. It's about 15, 16 degrees Celsius. I don't know Fahrenheit. I'm in the rest of the world. And
oh God.
And then in the dark and in the cold, they then start to they create an artificial light, but that looks like flickering, and then they move it across, and you see the animals, and it does look like it's like a flip book. They do look like they're moving. They do look like they're running. And honestly, I was getting a bit of shade from my fiance. She was like, I can't. This is like an hour and 45-minute drive. Just to look at something which we can only look at for like an hour or two because we've got to get somewhere else. And everybody came out and they were just like, wow. That was one of the most moving experiences. What's great is the reaction that people have isn't intellectual to that sort of stuff. It's not, oh, that's cool. Like, let's psychoanalyze that. That's for you and me to do. That's for you and I to do, mate. The instinctive reaction, and I felt it as well, is entirely emotional. You had a guttural, instinctive, emotional reaction to that before your brain kicked into gear. And when you start to engage and feel and touch the past like that, it doesn't feel like it's 30,000 years ago. It feels like it was yesterday. It's absolutely incredible.
I experienced this on a trip I went to. We went on a field trip to one of the art museums, and it was one in New York City. They had like a really famous one. I swear, dude, all my classmates were just looking at the paintings like, wow, that's a pretty painting. And then when they would walk to the next one, I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like I have my own painting of Vincent van Gogh in my room because I look at it and I'm trying to think, like, I know the story behind it. He was painting that out of his asylum window. Like he was in a fucking insane asylum painting Starry Night. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, imagine the thoughts that had to be going through his head. Like you talk about tripping on drugs or something. This man literally painted something that looks like you could be tripping on drugs, like a song or trailer from a Beatles thing.
Have you seen the Van Gogh film that came out recently?
I have not.
It was on Netflix in the UK. It's like a 60, 70 minute, it's an animated film. It's quite good. The actual story and the acting in it's all right. It's quite good. But what's amazing is it's an animated film where every single scene is an oil painting done in the style of Vincent van Gogh. So literally they had like thousands. I think they had a Kickstarter to try and get some artists to help them. They had like thousands of artists literally recreating every shot in the film in an oil painting in the Vincent van Gogh style. And it is, honestly, it's a good enough film to enjoy. But what you're watching is watching the artwork and the style. It's the most beautiful thing. But you get that same thing, like you look at it, such distinctive, such a, expression, so full of expression as an art style. But the way he does it, it's a little bit disturbing. It makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And again, you look at an object, you look at an artifact for this guy, and you get an insight into this. This is not a well man, but it's that line, isn't it? That classic line, like, where does genius become madness? And I think, people like Vincent van Gogh and your buddy Leonardo da Vinci.
They're creative minds that are misunderstood. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was known to be the most every single work he ever did was just never complete. It was
never did anything, never finished out.
Yeah, never finished this. But you don't know his concept was art is never finished, just left undone. Yeah. That was it. He believed constantly you can add something onto it.
That's a beautiful, marvelous statement. Because he's a genius, it's deep. If I said that at school when I handed in my piece of homework,
oh yeah, teacher would be like, "Get out of here, you Leonardo da Vinci copycat." That's what they would say to you.
Yeah, but mate, I mean, props to the kid who goes, "Look, art is never finished; it's always left undone." If I was a teacher and a kid said that to me, I'd be like, A star. Just for sheer confidence.
You would have loved me as a student, dude. I was like, when am I going to want to know when train A hits station at 45 miles per hour than when station B is expecting train C? When am I going to use this? Tell me about quicksand. I want to be Indiana Jones. I don't want to be Train Man. So what would you say your most fascinating thing that you've learned about in archaeology would be? At least just like through your studies on it. Like, do you have more fascination with where we are going to be leaving our prints maybe? Or like what people are going to be finding from us? Or do you have more of a fascination with kind of the older style? Like I would say for me, probably Greek statues. The fact that now we used, I think it was around 2008. We used this type of black light paint on top of the Greek statues, and it actually showed that all the statues actually had bright colors painted onto them, but after years it had eroded.
Yeah, it turns out people in the past didn't have as good a taste as we thought. They quite liked the gaudy, bright colors. When I went to university, the area of history that I really loved was a group of people called the Minoans. And these were the people who they're named after King Minos, who you will know because of the Minotaur.
Yeah.
So that's who they are. They were the Bronze Age Cretans, so an island off Greece called Crete. I thought I will become an expert on the Minoans because Crete's beautiful. It's got amazing food. I get to go there and dig in the summer, and I was like, that's what I'm going to love. I then got to university, and actually the archaeology that I find, I hate the question because I love most archaeology and I love archaeology from lots of different periods, but the stuff that I keep coming back to and I keep finding the most to get out of is British prehistory. So instead of eating beautiful Greek food in the sunshine after excavations, I end up cold and wet in pubs drinking warm beer. But I absolutely love it. I find, and I guess the reason is that it's an area that is at once very, very well studied, but still has absolutely massive gaps in our knowledge. It's an area where the evidence is, because of that, and also because of the nature of the archaeology, is very, very patchy. And it's so early in the development of society and so early in the development of religion.
Yeah, the Bronze Age.
I'm talking even before that. I'm talking like the Neolithic and the Mesolithic, which is subdivisions within the Stone Age. Lithic in Greek, stone in Greek is lithic. Paleo is old, so old Stone Age. Meso is middle Stone Age. Neo, new. It's just 3 different periods within a very, very long period of history. And during that period, you have cavemen, you have hunter-gatherers, and then you have the first farmers. And that transition, and then after that, you get the Bronze Age, which is when you get the development of society. That's the stuff that I'm really excited about. Actually, in the podcast, it's literally what we're about to get to in the podcast. And I'm so excited, and I'm really struggling because I want to make the episodes like 3 hours long because I just got so much to say. Because you start, even though British people aren't directly descended in any major way from the people of the Bronze Age or the Neolithic, a lot of what has become modern society has its very, very earliest roots, its very, very earliest things in that time. And of course, it means you get to study Stonehenge, which is great.
Did aliens build it or not? We still don't even know that. We know so little about that thing.
Okay, but isn't it so much more interesting to ask, did aliens build this? That's a pretty boring question because it's either yes or no. And if it's yes, well, cool, then we don't know anything more. We just have to go, oh, it's mysterious. That's fine.
But then that bolsters the fact that there is aliens out there. And why the hell did they help us build these statues? And what did they do? Did they form something? I mean, this is the same thing with the Nazca lines for a little bit. People thought that aliens did that because there were these lines that were...
They are mental, though, those things.
They're fucking like giant, like lines of like in shapes of llamas and animals. It's so amazing to see.
How did people know what they looked like? That's the bit that, okay, Stonehenge, pyramids, great. They're impressive from the ground, But the Nazca lines, they don't make any sense unless, like, I'd love to see this study, because people have only ever seen them from helicopters and airplanes. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to go to a nearby mountain or a nearby hillside to try and get an understanding of them, because we didn't know what they were until like the 1920s, when like people are like, oh, tally-ho, let's go fly over.
I have 2 theories of the Nazca line. So this is before air travel. We got one guy that stacked a bunch of rocks up on top of each other, then climbed all the way up to the top of the rocks. Then he sat there, goes, a little to the left, you're going to make the llama's nose. A little bit more. All right, cool. Or it was just some dude like, I'm just going to draw the best I possibly can. He just took a stick, stuck it in the ground, just kept on walking and drawing, and it magically made these perfect images. The second one seems a little bit more like bullshit. But the first one's a good concept.
Honestly, if they can build something that because they are like perfect, like line perfect, I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't build a scaffold. But even so, I mean, to me, it probably speaks that they understood geometry better than we give them credit for.
I mean, yeah, it's literally perfect. I mean, maybe I'll slight it off, but if you go super high up into the sky and look down at these images, like they've taken them from pictures from planes and helicopters, they didn't have this equipment to get that high up back then, but everything's so perfectly lined up and drawn.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a llama. It can't, like some of those, they're obviously certain animals. They can't be anything else. And
well, you got to think of, I throw this out there, there could have been what is known as an idiot savant. It's those type of people that suffer from like kind of mental disabilities, and
they're like a guy who flew around New York once in a helicopter and then drew like a perfect pencil.
Yeah, that's idiot savant. So maybe it was a dude that was like, I know how to draw a line in the sand really well to make shapes of animals, and then he just started going ham, and then everyone's like, that's Pencilides, he's a little bit special, but he's got a really good skill. He says he can make these lines in the sand.
We don't know what it is, but it makes him happy. I mean, this is one of my little bugbears with archaeologists. Is one of the things that winds me up is I would love to do a study one day or do some research where again, I'm maybe putting my own cart before my horse. It's bad science, but to try and explain as many archaeological sites as possible on archaeological discoveries, just because people were bored and curious. Like, I think archaeologists tend to have, and people in general want to make the past mysterious and magical and wonderful. But I don't like, if you look at modern day people, we don't spend our time going, oh yeah, like, oh, isn't that mysterious? Isn't that magical? Instead, we go, you know what? I'm really, really bored. I want to set something on fire and see what happens. You know, I think there's a huge gap in, and there's a huge bias in archaeology towards mystery and meaning, which is good. I think it provides more interesting questions. But but if you're searching for the correct answer, I think there's a huge space for just people being bored and wanting to experiment.
Yeah, I mean, throughout history, it's probably seen like that. People just want to, they end up discovering something like fire on the basis of accident, just because they were trying something.
Yeah.
But with archaeologists, you get so many of them in a room, everyone has their own interpretation of things. It's the same reason why if I look at a painting and you look at a painting, we're going to see two completely different things.
Yeah.
It might have the basis of what it's supposed to be. That's a picture of a llama. That's a picture of a dog or something. But we're both going to have different interpretations to it in ourselves.
100%.
But that's what makes archaeology so amazing, is because you get so many different answers to just one thing.
Yeah, definitely. Do you mind if I just briefly take a quick comfort break for a second?
Yeah, actually, if we're getting ready to wrap it up, dude, if that's cool.
Yeah, let's wrap up here, mate. Yeah, that sounds good.
I wanted to give you a minute here at the end to kind of promote your podcast, man. I want people to find your awesome content.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, the podcast, it's called Old Bones, and the tagline is exploring the past one skeleton at a time. You can find us on search Old Bones on Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Yeah, we're in our first season at the moment. It's going really, really well. Next episode, we're talking about loving the Mesolithic. I've just released an episode today, actually, which is all about cannibalism in the Stone Age. So we cover a whole range of topics, and yeah, it's going really well. I'm absolutely loving it, and I hope people can find it, enjoy it. I'm looking for feedback and ways to improve it. So listen and get involved.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, for being on the podcast. And
it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Everybody check out his podcast, Old Bones, and rattle your bones.